Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session about speaker recognition, in fact about embeddings and network architectures for speaker recognition. We will have 5 papers here. Unfortunately, 2 of them will be presented remotely, so there will be a video played and the Q&A the speaker will take afterwards online. Of course, we would love to take questions here from the audience, but also from the online participants. So I would encourage whoever is participating online to put the questions into writing into the platform, so I would be able to read them to all of us here. We would appreciate probably to put the question in text. It would be faster, and we would not have overlapping questions. But of course, if you prefer to ask the questions online, you can do so with raising hands. And when the Q&A is active, we will connect you on the stage, and you can ask the questions live. So I guess we will not prolong this much longer because we want to be on schedule. So we will play the first presentation by Chao Lu, and the paper is leveraging speaker attribute information using multitask learning for speaker verification and diarization. So let's play the video and ask the questions later.
Hi all. I'm Chao Lu from the University of Edinburgh, CSTR, and I'd like to talk about our paper called Leveraging Speaker Attribute Information Using Multitask Learning for Speaker Verification and Diarization. What are speaker embeddings? Well, they are fixed dimensional representations that capture speaker identity, with deep speaker embeddings now being the best performing method of extracting them. And in general, we can say that the aim is for the embedding space to capture what makes up speaker identity in a discriminative fashion. And that naturally begs the question, what makes up speaker identity? And according to human experts in forensic speaker identification in law enforcement, it's things like gender, regional accent, age, or linguistic content. Typically, deep speaker embeddings are trained using a speaker classification task, and it's been shown in lots of prior work that with only this learning objective, certain attributes like the ones mentioned previously, in addition to things like emotion, style, and keywords, are already captured to some degree. As for channel information, this links into our previous work presented at ICASP 2020. Called Channel Adversarial Training for Speaker Verification and Diarization. In that work, we used an adversary to penalize the embeddings for containing channel information. Our motivation for this was that we believe channel information would not generalize well for discriminating speakers, whereas it may work during training time. This would be particularly true for the task of diarization, in which embeddings are extracted from the same recording and thus would share a lot of channel information. In that work, we showed that suppressing channel information using the adversary improved performance for both verification and diarization. Leading back to this work, we asked the question, why not try and encourage the embedding space to capture attributes which we think or know to be speaker discriminative? The way that we try to do that in this work is by using multitask learning, in which multiple learning tasks are performed using the same shared representation. In our case, this is using the speaker embedding layer to predict something about the speaker attributes, in addition to classifying the speaker. In theory, we can add any m number of additional tasks to supplement the speaker classification. Our motivation for this is that we theorize that multitask learning can encourage the embedding space to be structured in a specific way. And this structure, we have a prior belief to be helpful in distinguishing speaker identity through intuition or the aforementioned forensic speaker identification experts. This hopefully increases reliance on aspects of the audio which we believe will generalize well, as opposed to relying on things like channel information, which we would prefer to suppress. Now, this is appealing in theory, but it is largely limited by the availability of data, and specifically these auxiliary labels for these speaker attributes. However, the attributes that we used in this paper, age and nationality, can be obtained via web scraping for certain corpora, which we'll go into further detail now. But first of all, why use age? The effects of age on the human voice is fairly well studied, and the phenomena is sometimes referred to as presbyphonia, which leads to changes in things like the fundamental frequency, reduction in volume, along with other aspects which change the quality of the voice. For age labels, we require the corpus to, of course, have speaker labels, but we also require both the date of the recording in addition to the date of birth of the speaker, which is extremely rare. And the corpus which we used to satisfy these demands was the Supreme Court of the United States Oral Arguments Corpus, which is also known as the OEA project, which is all of the cases argued in front of the Supreme Court justices. And there are audio recordings dating back to the 50s, but 2005 is when the recording practice was changed from digital recordings as opposed to tape recordings. These have been human transcribed with speaker labels and then automatically aligned. The speakers in this corpus are either law professionals or the justices, meaning their date of birth is either public domain or some age information can be obtained by finding out when they registered to practice law with the Bar Association, with their state Bar Association. The approximate date of birth can then be obtained by subtracting 25 years from this date. In total, this is 1,022 recordings, 1,032 hours, and 913 speakers. And that's taken from the date these experiments were run, since this corpus is forever increasing, since there's always cases to be argued in front of the Supreme Court. As for nationality, we obtained these labels for VoxCeleb speakers by using Wikipedia, since all the speakers are celebrities in some way. Of course, we would prefer an explicit accent label, since nationality doesn't necessarily inform the characteristics of one's voice, but this is sort of a passable proxy for accent in the absence of an explicit accent label. So we performed experiments using age or nationality as additional tasks, with SCOTUS having 10-bin age classification tasks, with SCOTUS having this additional 10-bin age classification task, and VoxCeleb having this additional nationality classification task. And this is to train speaker embeddings. For SCOTUS, we split recordings into train and tests according to an 80% training proportion, and generated our own verification task by selecting 15 positive and 15 negative trials for each test set speaker. We trained the X-vector architecture with these additional tasks or not in 3 training regimes. We trained on SCOTUS and evaluated on SCOTUS. We also trained on VoxCeleb and evaluated on VoxCeleb. And we also trained on VoxCeleb, fine-tuned on SCOTUS, and then evaluated on SCOTUS. And to eliminate any regularizing effect of the additional tasks, since they're most likely noisy to being web scraped, we also ran experiments with shuffled auxiliary labels, and this can sort of be seen as like a 100% noise version of our sub% noisy labels. For verification and diarization, we used cosine similarity scoring with no score normalization. And for diarization, we used agglomerative hierarchical clustering to the oracle number of speakers. For diarization on SCOTUS, since some training speakers appear in the test set, which is unavoidable due to the Supreme Court justices appearing in nearly every recording to sort of oversee the arguments, we evaluated the diarization error rate in 2 ways. Firstly, scoring all the speech, and second of all, scoring only unseen speaker portions. So for SCOTUS to SCOTUS, we can see that the speaker plus age outperforms the only speaker model. And reassuringly, adding the random or shuffled label experiment yielded no improvement whatsoever. We also performed some experiments using only the auxiliary labels available. For gender and only random, pretty much nothing was learned. And that sort of makes sense considering gender, as mentioned, can largely be discriminated by F0 alone. But surprisingly, only age classification performs quite well, especially considering it's only a 10-bin age classification task, which suggests that to learn something about age, the network must also learn a good deal about speaker identity. For Voxelab trained on Voxelab and evaluated on Voxelab, adding nationality also improved performance in verification over only using the speaker. And here, sort of quite a large table, but it's the Voxelab models fine-tuned on SCOTUS and then evaluated on SCOTUS. And we sort of had two configurations for the fine-tuning, wherein we either fine-tune only the last linear layer before the X-vector embedding, or the whole network. So if you look at the only speaker models against adding any form of auxiliary labels at either stage, it is always outperformed in verification and diarization by models which have been trained on one or more of these additional speaker attributes. And this is the case for when only one set of labels has been used, but the best performance is obtained when you can use nationality when training originally on Voxelab, and then also using age at the fine-tuning step. So, in summary, using age or nationality classification as additional tasks improve verification and diarization performance. This was achieved using web scrape labels, which are most likely noisy. Where possible, using more auxiliary labels yielded the best performance, but improvements were still found when only one set of auxiliary labels were utilized. And we think this supports our hypothesis that encouraging the embedding space to conform to what we have some prior belief makes up speaker identity, increases robustness and generalizability. And for future work, we'd like to work on things like privacy preserving speaker embeddings, potentially using combining our previous work using an adversary to suppress this kind of information, but still yield some form of speaker identification or speaker discriminability. And yeah, I think I'll end it there. Thanks for listening, and I hope you have a really good interspeech.
Okay, let's thank the speaker. And we will try to connect the speaker here. Yeah, we can see him. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, so are there any questions from audience now? So you can think about it, and in the meantime, we have two questions here from online people. So I will read them for all of us. So the first question would be, if you can make available the map of comparison of the speaker ID and nationality for Voxelab dataset. So maybe I will rephrase. Did you need to do something special to get the nationality IDs for the Voxelab dataset? And in fact, can you make available some mappings and lists for the community?
He's frozen.
Ah, a first technical problem with the first presentation.
Okay.
Let's try to reconnect him.
Yeah.
Well, let's wait for 1 or 2 minutes if he's able to connect again, but there are many questions already in the platform, but unfortunately we don't have the speaker.
I don't know what happened.
All
Yeah,
right.
apologies, my internet dropped off.
So you're back. So did you hear the first questions about?
No, I didn't, unfortunately, sorry.
So the first question was about making available the map, the nationalities of the speakers and the voxel app dataset. Did you need to do something special to get these IDs and to train with them?
So yeah, that's actually an additional requirement the corpora required for this kind of thing, is that you need de-anonymized speakers. So it's a bit questionable since the original paper, I think the speakers that they used for Voxel were actually the VGG Phase 2 speakers. So if the original project page for that had the de-anonymized labels, that's since been taken down, so I'm not sure if there's some kind of legal reasons for that. So yeah, I'm kind of unsure legally where it stands for that kind of data.
All right, thanks. So we will move to a next question fast because we have just like 3 minutes. So then another question is why the diarization error rate for unseen test examples is lower than diarization error rate for all test examples?
Yeah, so that's actually a very good question. I suspect it's, well, I had a little bit of a deep dive and it was still kind of unclear to me, but yeah, I suppose my best estimate was just they spoke for a lot less time. So the justices, the kind of the nature of the corpus is kind of weird in that you have these justices who speak for most of the time, and they do argue the other speakers, the unseen speakers who are like the law professionals, do speak a little bit, and it's usually they only have one turn. So that's likely also the cause of why it's better, because it's not really switching speakers for them as much. They sort of present their argument and then the justices intersperse their own takes on the case. But so I think that's probably more a quirk of the data set.
Okay, thank you. And maybe we can try to ask a question from the audience if there is any. If there is not, there are still some questions. Yeah. Okay, yeah, here, David.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a nice presentation. I have a question about lambdas. So I saw somewhere that they were chosen fixed at 0.05. Was there any optimization done? And if so, did you scan the lambda range and do you know the effect of that? And did you minimize in a proper way, using a proper dev set and then reporting the eval set?
Yes, sorry, there is a dev set there, which is like a very small 10% portion of the train proportion, which I use for selecting it. But on the tables, I should have specified, there's like the fixed lambda for each of the tasks is used throughout the thing. So yeah, I think with all multitask learning, if you've ever read any other multitask learning papers, the selection of the lambda is quite important. So yeah, that had to be used, that had to be tuned using a dev set.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I think we can have a quick one more question. If there is one from audience, we can ask it here, or I will just read it. Okay, there is one more here. So the question is, have you tried, for example, using a reverse gradient to exclude information about age and nationality for better speaker embedding robustness?
So as in to penalize that information and do the opposite. Yeah, so that is, I haven't actually tried that yet, but that is kind of the next thing I want to try. That kind of goes against the hypothesis of what I just said, so it'd be interesting if that worked, and I'd probably have to rethink my theoretical justifications why this does work. But yeah, I definitely should. So yeah, it's a good point.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your presentation, and let's thank the speaker again.